After moving into a high-rise apartment for a fresh start, a woman begins finding helpful. Anonymous notes stuck to the inside of her dead-bolted door each morning, offering advice that is always uncannily correct. The notes slowly become more controlling and possessive, proving the writer isn't just watching her from afar, they're somehow getting inside her home every night while she sleeps. The security of the Callaway Tower was its main selling point. 30 floors of steel and reinforced concrete, a concierge in the marble-floored lobby, and a key fob system that made the building feel less like an apartment complex and more like a fortress. For me, Alara Vance, a clinical pharmacist, escaping the ghost of a shattered relationship, it was perfect.
Ow.
My ex, a man whose love had curdled into a possessive obsession, had made my small ground-floor apartment feel like a cage with glass bars. Here on the 27th floor, with the city sprawling beneath me like a silent, glittering carpet, I felt untouchable. The silence of the apartment was a balm, a thick, comforting blanket I could wrap myself in. The only sounds were the distant hum of the city and the rhythmic, reassuring thump of my own heart, finally at peace. The first note appeared on the third morning. It was a small, yellow, sticky note, pressed neatly onto the cool, steel surface of my front door. Just below the deadbolt I had meticulously locked the night before. The handwriting was a crisp, clean block print. It read, "The faucet in your bathroom sink has a slow drip. A quarter turn of the valve underneath should fix it." I stood there for a full minute, my mind a blank slate. I hadn't noticed a drip. Walked into the bathroom, leaned over the pristine white porcelain, and listened. Sure enough, a tiny, almost imperceptible plink. Plink, ... plink. Echoed from the drain. I knelt, my fingers finding the cold metal valve, and gave it a slight turn. The dripping stopped. Returned to the door, my heart now a little less rhythmic. It was strange, certainly, but I chalked it up to the building's attentive, almost legendary maintenance staff. Perhaps they had remote sensors, some advanced system for detecting plumbing issues. I peeled the note off the door, crumpled it, and threw it in the trash, dismissing the faint unease that pricked at the back of my neck. The second note came 2 days later. The organic market on 8th Street gets its fresh bread delivery at 7 a.m. The sourdough is worth the walk. This time, the unease was a little stronger. This wasn't about maintenance. This was personal. But again, I rationalized. The previous tenant might have left a list of helpful tips for the landlord. I even took the advice. The sourdough was, in fact, spectacular. For the first 2 weeks, the notes were my silent, helpful companions. A storm is coming tomorrow afternoon. The windows in the living room sometimes rattle if not fully latched. He was right. The fire alarm test is scheduled for 10 a.m. on Wednesday. Don't be alarmed. He was always right.
Yes.
The shift was so subtle, I almost didn't notice it. It began with a note about the blue dress I had bought the previous weekend. "The blue dress is a wonderful color on you.
Yes.
You should wear it more often." My blood went cold. I had brought the dress home in an opaque shopping bag. The only time I had worn it was inside my apartment, standing in front of my own full-length mirror, the blinds drawn. There was no way anyone could have seen me. My paranoid fantasies of hidden cameras began, though my rationalizations were becoming more frantic, more desperate. The notes started to arrive daily. The advice became less about the building and more about me. "You seem to be drinking too much coffee. It will interfere with your sleep." Another commented on the half-eaten lasagna in my fridge. He had to have been inside, but how? My sanctuary was beginning to feel like a meticulously curated prison cell, and the warden was invisible. I decided to perform my own security checks. I bought a cheap security camera, a little white dome that I placed on a bookshelf opposite the front door. I wedged a piece of paper in the door jamb before I went to bed. I sprinkled a fine line of flour on the floor by the entrance. The next morning, the flour was undisturbed. The piece of paper was still in place. The camera's motion-activated log showed nothing, and yet, there it was. A new note, stuck to the door, right in the center of the camera's view. A security camera is an ugly addition to such a beautiful room. It makes our home feel so impersonal. Our home. The two words echoed in the silent apartment, a declaration of ownership that made my skin crawl. The helpful ghost was gone. In its place was an intimate, invasive presence that knew the contents of my fridge, my wardrobe, my mind. It knew my habits, my anxieties, and now it knew I was trying to unmask it, and it was mocking me. My fortress had been breached, not by force, but by a phantom who moved through walls and locked doors. I decided to fight back, to reclaim the sanctity of my space. My first step was to visit the building management office. I spoke to a polite but detached woman named Ms. Albright, her face a mask of professional concern. She listened patiently. "Ms. Vance," she said, her tone smooth and placating, "our building has an impeccable security record. The only person with a master key is our superintendent, Mr. Finch." Mr. Finch. I had seen him, a quiet, stooped man with pale eyes and hands that seemed too large for his slender frame, left the office feeling more isolated than ever. That night, I took matters into my own hands. I bought a new, heavy-duty deadbolt and a door jammer, a brutal-looking piece of steel that braced against the floor. I installed them myself, my hands shaking. The next morning, my heart hammered against my ribs as I approached the door. The jammer was still firmly in place. The new deadbolt was untouched. I breathed a sigh of relief, and then I saw it. The yellow note was not on the door this time. It was on my bedside table. "You shouldn't have done that. It shows a lack of trust." I stumbled back, a scream catching in my throat. I fled the apartment and ran to a friend's house across town. I stayed with her for 3 days, a shivering, sleepless wreck. My friend Sarah insisted I call the police. I sat in a cold, impersonal interrogation room telling my story to a detective named Miller. He was a wary-looking man with a kind face, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. No signs of forced entry, nothing stolen, just notes, he summarized. They found nothing. No strange fingerprints, no fibers, no signs of a break-in. The only evidence was the collection of yellow notes I had saved, a small stack of escalating madness that proved nothing. Forced to return to the apartment, I didn't sleep. I sat in a chair in the living room, facing the front door, a heavy kitchen knife clutched in my hand. The silence of the apartment was no longer comforting. It was alive, breathing, waiting. Just after 3 a.m., my phone, which I had placed on the floor beside me, lit up. A new email. From an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was a single word. "Tonight." The body of the email contained a single image. It was a live feed from a camera. I was looking at myself, asleep in my own bed, from an angle high in the corner of my bedroom. The timestamp in the corner was from the previous week, and then I saw the second email. It had arrived just moments after the first. The subject line was, "Now." The image was a live feed of me, sitting in the chair, clutching the knife, my face pale with terror. It was being filmed from inside the air vent on the ceiling. Soft, metallic scraping sound came from the vent cover directly above me. It was slowly, silently being pushed open from the inside. A man inherits his estranged father's remote cabin and finds a hidden collection of detailed journals, chronicling a lifetime of being stalked by an entity his father called the Silent Observer. While reading about his father's descent into madness, he notices a fresh pair of footprints in the mud outside the cabin's only door, footprints that perfectly match the strange illustrations in the journal. My father, Arthur Cole, and I were not close. He was a man of jagged edges and deep, brooding silences. A geologist who preferred the company of ancient stones to his own son, he spent the last 30 years of his life in a rustic, self-built cabin deep within the forests of northern Maine. When he died, the lawyer's letter felt less like a tragedy and more like a final, inconvenient piece of paperwork. I was his only heir. The cabin and the 20 acres of dense, unforgiving wilderness it sat upon were now mine. My name is Liam Cole. I am a civil engineer. I build bridges, structures of logic, and predictable stress points. I drove up to the cabin, not out of sentiment, but out of a sense of duty, intending to appraise the property and sell it as quickly as possible. The cabin was exactly as I remembered it, a dark timber-framed structure, slowly surrendering to the encroaching forest. The air inside was heavy, thick with the weight of years of solitude. It took me half a day to find the journals. They were tucked away in a loose-bottomed cedar chest, wrapped in oilcloth. There were 5 of them, thick leather-bound volumes filled with my father's cramped, agitated script. I sat in his worn armchair, a glass of whiskey in my hand, and began to read. I expected to find geological notes. Instead, I found a detailed, terrifying chronicle of a man's mind coming undone. He called it the Silent Observer. October 12th, the first entry read, "Saw it again today. At the edge of the tree line, by the old oak. It doesn't move, just stands there, tall, taller than a man should be. It watches the cabin." The entries were filled with descriptions of this figure, always at a distance, a tall, unnaturally thin silhouette. Alongside the text were strange, almost childlike sketches. They depicted a stick figure-like man with elongated limbs and a peculiar detail. One foot was always drawn as a perfect circle, the other a sharp, triangular shape. As I read, I felt a growing sense of pity for my father. The solitude had clearly broken him, was a textbook case of paranoia, a slow descent into a self-contained delusion. I was reading the blueprint of his madness. I finished the first journal and stood up to stretch. I walked to the cabin's only door and looked out at the darkening woods. A recent rain had left the ground soft and muddy, and that's when I saw them. Pressed into the dark, wet earth just a few feet from the cabin steps was a single, clear set of footprints. One footprint was a deep, almost perfect circle. The other was a sharp, unmistakable triangle. They were fresh. My engineer's mind scrambled for a rational explanation. A prank. A local eccentric. Any explanation was better than the impossible truth. I slammed the door shut, the heavy wood booming in the silent cabin, and slid the iron bolt across. The first night was an exercise in controlled paranoia. I barricaded the single door with a heavy oak table and sat with my back to the stone fireplace, fire axe resting against my chair. The image of those impossible footprints was burned into my retinas. I slept fitfully, waking to a cold, gray dawn. The first thing I did was check the mud. The footprints were still there, slightly softened by the morning dew. A new detail emerged. They were deep, suggesting a significant weight. Driven by a need to debunk the growing fear, I spent the day exploring the woods around the cabin. I found nothing but the deep, oppressive silence of the ancient forest, and for the first time, the terrifying feeling of being watched. I returned to the cabin at dusk, unnerved and empty-handed. That evening, I delved into the second journal. My father's entries became more desperate. He wrote about the observer's subtle interactions with his environment. July 5th. It moved the woodpile, stacked it differently. A message. It's telling me it can get closer whenever it wants. After reading the entry, a cold dread prompted me to check my own surroundings. I had spent the morning chopping firewood, stacking it haphazardly. I'd shown my flashlight on the pile. It was now a perfect, tightly interlocked stack. My scientific mind was losing its footing. The next day, I drove into the nearest town and bought 3 battery-powered trail cameras. I mounted them strategically, one watching the front door, one watching the woodpile, and one aimed at the edge of the tree line. That night, I watched the live feed from the cameras on my laptop. For hours, there was nothing. I must have dozed off, because I was jolted awake by a notification on my screen. The camera at the tree line had detected motion. I held my breath. The footage was choppy, the connection weak. A shape was moving in the deep woods. It was tall and possibly thin, and it moved with a strange, lurching gait. It stopped at the very edge of the camera's range and stood perfectly still, watching. It was real. My father wasn't mad. Then, the feed from the first camera, the one aimed at my front door, flashed a notification. Motion detected. I switched to its view. Screen was black. Something was standing directly in front of the camera. A soft scratching sound came from the front door. It was the sound of a long, sharp fingernail being dragged slowly, deliberately, down the length of the heavy oak door. The scratching stopped. The oppressive silence returned. Then, a new sound. A soft, wet thump against the door. And another. And another. I waited until dawn, the axe held so tightly my knuckles were white. When the first rays of sun pierced the gloom, I crept to the window. The footprints were still there. But now, arranged neatly in a circle around them, were 3 dead crows, their necks broken. I knew then that I couldn't stay. This thing had driven my father to his death, and now it had fixed its silent, malevolent attention on me. I packed my car in a frantic haze, constantly looking over my shoulder. As I drove away, the cabin shrinking in my rearview mirror, a final notification popped up on my phone from the trail camera app. The camera at the tree line had captured one last image before its batteries died. It was a daytime photo. The lighting was clear. The silent observer was standing in the exact same spot, watching me leave. But now, I could see it was not a phantom. It was a man dressed in dark, ragged clothing. And in his hand, he was holding a single, leather-bound journal. He was holding it up as if in a silent toast, a gesture of passing the torch. He wasn't just my father's stalker, it was now mine. A man receives a friend request on social media from his girlfriend who died in a car crash a year ago. After accepting out of grief and confusion, her ghost's account begins sending him photos of himself taken in real time from angles inside his own locked home, each captioned with inside jokes only the two of them could ever have known. Her name was Maya. She was the architect of my happiness, the one who could map out a future I actually wanted to live in. Then, a year ago, on a rain-slicked highway, that future was wiped from the blueprint. I, Alex, a software developer who built logical systems for a living, found myself trapped in the most illogical, cruel system of all, mourning. My life had become a small, contained loop in our shared apartment, now a museum of a life that was over. The friend request came on a Tuesday night, the 1-year anniversary of the crash. I was scrolling numbly through my social media feed when her face popped up. Her profile picture, the one of her smiling on that beach in Portugal. The name was simply Maya. My logical mind knew it was a cruel prank. But my grief, a wild, irrational beast, saw a ghost, a miracle. My finger hovered over the accept button. The desperate, broken part of me won. I clicked. For a week, nothing happened. The account was silent. I started to forget about it. The first message arrived late one night, a simple sentence. "The porch light is flickering again. You always forget to fix it." I froze. Our old inside joke. I walked to the front window. Sure enough, the small lamp above my front door was stuttering. I messaged back, my hands trembling. "Who is this?" The reply was instant. It was a photo, a picture of me, taken just seconds before, my face illuminated by my phone screen. It was taken from across the street, from the shadows. A wave of cold, primal fear washed over me. This was a stalker, someone who knew Maya, knew me, knew our jokes, someone who was watching me right now. I ran through the apartment, checking the locks. I reported the account, and it vanished. I felt a momentary sense of relief. 2 days later, a new friend request appeared. The profile picture was different, a candid shot of Maya I had taken myself. The name was M, revisited. I blocked it. An hour later, another. Block. The final request came from an account with no picture. The name was simply, "I know you." This time, there was a message attached. It was a photo of me sleeping in my own bed. It had been taken the previous night. The angle was from the foot of my bed. The caption beneath the photo destroyed my last semblance of sanity. "You still kick the blankets off in your sleep? Just like you did when you had that nightmare about the spiders." The spider nightmare. I had told only one person about that, Maya. This thing. I'd just thrown one of our most intimate, private moments in my face. My expertise as a developer kicked in, a desperate attempt to impose logic on the terror. I swept my apartment for bugs, for hidden cameras, running professional-grade software. I found nothing. I changed all my passwords. I physically taped over the camera on my laptop, my phone, even my smart TV. My apartment was now a hostile territory. I was listening through headphones. The stalker wasn't just watching me. They were listening to me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The smart speaker, the little gray cylinder on my kitchen counter that Maya had insisted we buy. It was a microphone. I ripped it out of the wall. For a glorious 48 hours, there was silence. No new accounts, no messages, no photos. I started to breathe again. I had found the source. I had cut the cord. The illusion of safety shattered on the third night. I was sitting in the dark reading a book when my phone vibrated. A new message from an unknown number. It was a photo of the book in my hands. The angle was from directly above my head. The message beneath it read, "I don't need the internet to be with you, Alex." I sprang up, my eyes darting to the ceiling. Smoke detector, the small white plastic disc. It had a lens. It had always been there. The final message came a few minutes later. "I miss you. The front door is unlocked. Let's talk." I stared at the message, my mind collapsing under the weight of the impossible. Was it really her? A ghost in the machine? Or was it something far more real and far more terrifying? A soft click echoed from the hallway, the sound of my smart lock, the one I had forgotten to disable, disengaging. The front door creaked open,